everyone, welcome. We are streaming live from our Startup Test Kitchen here in Seattle, Washington. My name is Vanessa Craycraft. I am the online resident chef for Startup. If you have taken a class with us before, you probably already know me. But today it's not about me. Today we are here to celebrate the launch for Bob Kramer's new knife collection, Cumulus, exclusive to Startup. As you know, Bob Kramer is considered the greatest American bladesmith working today. So we are so happy to have him with us. Joining us also, we have Brad Leone. He is a video host and cookbook author. So needless to say, you're in for a treat today. Now, before we get started, we have some housekeeping. So we're gonna ask that all of you stay muted and throughout the class. If you have any questions, as we do our presentation, right, you can write them or type them, submit them in our chat here. Toward the end of the class, we're going to have a Q&A session of about 20 minutes, all right, to answer all of your questions. We also provide at the end of the class our email address in case some of your questions don't get answered so that we can address them afterwards, okay? So I'll let these two take over. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, yeah, thank you, Amanda, for the kind opening, and Bob, thanks for having me, man.
Well, thanks for coming out. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure getting to hang out with you and chat with you, and you know, one of the focuses today being your new line of knives, the Cumulus, which you know, right to the eye, I love it. It's gorgeous. I've been using it for a little bit, and yeah, it's great, man. So you know, I guess I wanted to, you know, I've known you for a while. We made a knife together. I've been, you know, very lucky to do that with you, and I learned so much and took away from it. And then being able to use your different models of knives, you know, what really kind of helped you get into design and kind of get into this one?
So this blade was, but this is a little smaller model. The handles are slightly smaller. The blades are a little bit narrower as compared to, like, this was my first design. So this is a super deep chef's knife, and the handles are a little bit bigger. My hands
Kramer class.
Exactly. Yeah. And this was the knife that I designed. This was sort of my dream knife when I was in the kitchen, and then after I transitioned out of the kitchen, started making knives. I thought this is the ideal knife for me, but it's actually a little bit big for some people.
It's a lot of handle.
It's a lot of handle, yeah, and it's a deep blade. So this one is a little shallower, a little smaller handle. So I think it'll fit more.
You know, in the design of that, it must be tough because, like, to me, like, a knife is such a personal tool. It's almost like a pair of jeans. You know what I mean? Like, every knife is every pair or every knife is gonna be a little different, a different experience for every person, right? So like, designing something that has potential to satisfy everyone's needs has got to be a bit of a challenge, and I think you nailed it with this one, man. Like, I got pretty big mitts, so like the handle on this is nice, you know, but like this is it kind of choked up on it nice. It doesn't. Yeah, I can see that being really versatile.
It's a little bit lighter. It's a little bit more nimble, and you can actually, you know, make turns a little bit easier with this because it's narrower.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, like this one being your carbon knife, right? It's just it doesn't rust on you. It's a straight. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's a one type of steel.
Yeah, mono steel.
Mono steel, as opposed to this, which is more of a. Oh, it's just, you tell me about.
It's a laminate. So this is 101 layers. So there's 50 layers on either side of stainless and nickel, and then hold it steady. Don't cut my finger. See how the edge is dark? That's the cutting steel. That's like the top-notch SG2 super high alloy powdered metal. It's all stainless. It won't rust. It won't discolor. It takes a nice sharp edge, and it's super wear resistant. So it's pretty much state of the art.
So that when you say laminated, right? I mean, my mind goes to like croissants and stuff, right? But like, so this is when you say laminated, it's folded layers. That like, is it? Correct me if I'm wrong. That Damascus style.
It is Damascus. Yeah. It's forge welded material. So all those layers under high temperature are squeezed together, and they're fused. They're bonded.
Yeah. It's amazing. So like, I've actually had, because I have a few knives and Damascus knives, and a couple of them being yours. I've had people come up to me and be like, "That's cool and all, but I don't need all the jazz on the blade, the laser etched kind of." Yeah. It's so pretty and I mean, it almost looks like an oil, like it's such a design. It almost looks like it was laser etched, but that's literally just the different layers of the metals being ground down and exposing it. Right?
Yeah. So there's no laser whatsoever that has touched the side of that knife. What you're actually seeing is all of those layers, they get patterned and then it gets polished and then it's dipped in acid for a second and all those layers come out. You see the different coloration. The bright stuff is nickel and the dark stuff is stainless steel.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So it's a real laminate. It's a true Damascus and it's a high-tech Damascus steel.
And then the handle, I love the white that you did with it, right? Is it the first knife you made with ZWILLING that has a white finish handle, right?
So white handles are challenging because you've got all this polishing compound. It's getting passed through the factory. All the different people are
It's like
handling.
a white T-shirt, and it's going to show everything, right?
Exactly, man. It's tough to keep them clean and dry, or
It's gorgeous.
clean anyway.
Yeah.
But this stuff, one of the things I like about it is it looks like ivory.
It does, or bone, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, which I love on a handle.
Yeah.
Um,
But those
Agreed.
things are fragile and they shrink. This stuff is super durable. It's made out of phenolic resin, which is what they make high-end cue balls. Like they make cue balls, but very often they're
is
made
that
out of
what they
resin.
made out of? Really?
The good ones are made
Good
out of
ones.
phenolic.
All right.
Yeah.
You're a pool player, Bob.
I play a little pool.
That means he's a shark, right? You guys see him in the pool hole, he's steer clear. Not only is it meat with knife. But yeah, man, I don't know that. Interesting.
Yeah.
So getting back to that, so it makes it as opposed to a wood, or I mean, it's stable.
It's super stable. It's super tough. I mean, you can scrub it. And what I don't put them in the dishwasher. Just don't put any knives in the dishwasher. And but if you just give it normal hand washing use, the thing will last forever.
Sure, absolutely. Well, it's a piece of art, man. It's absolutely gorgeous. And if you guys stick around at the end of our chat here, me and Bob, we're gonna be picking one of you lucky guys or gals to give one away to. So stay tuned, and it may be you. So yeah, this is great, Bob. And how many different this is what, an 10-inch chef knife, 8-inch?
That's an 8.
Right. What other styles is this knife coming in?
So there's a santoku, a utility knife, and a paring knife in the set. And then you also get a sharpening steel.
Sharpening steel?
Yeah.
As opposed to a honing steel?
Yeah, I mean, some people call it honing steel, some people call it sharpening steel. It kind of does the same thing. And if I'm not mistaken, the one that comes in the set is actually, it's a dual-sided steel. So I asked ZWILLING to make this. They usually would make a steel that's got these grooves on all sides. But this one's different. It's got 2 smooth sides and 2 grooved sides. So when you're using the knife as you're cutting and you notice that the performance drops a little bit, you want to use the smooth sides. And so you just put the hone on here and use the 2 smooth sides, because as you're using that knife and you're hitting the cutting board, the edge will kind of get out of alignment.
Sure.
And the smooth sides will hone or straighten. But this is also called a sharpening steel because this material is harder than the knife is. And so if you rub this on the grooved sides, this is a file. This is a linear file.
Removing material.
And it'll remove steel.
Right.
Yeah, if you were to look at the edge, after using the groove side, you'd see little teeth.
Well, when I, the last time we hung out, we were in the shop up in Washington, and as much as you can, it's hands on and you're grinding and you're heating steel and you're hammering it. Man, it blew me away with how much you learned and do, looking at steel and edges under a microscope. And that was the first time I was introduced to what makes up an edge and why it's sharp and what is happening when it gets dull and when you put it on a honing steel. And you described it to me the best. And I tell people the same thing all the time, and I'll never forget it. But it's just like when you showed me that picture under that like electronic, it was insane. Under that electronic microscope, the edge was all these little diamonds that were kind of folding over.
Yeah.
And that was just from wear and tear and using it and cutting material, right? And then when you threw it on the sharpening steel, it was just throwing them back up, correct?
Yeah, and it smooths all those grooves out. I mean, you can get scratches on the side of the knife or teeth that are all bent over. And then as soon as you polish it back up, you get all that stuff in alignment and you get this totally smooth surface.
You can instantly feel the difference.
Yeah, and you can see under the microscope helps because looking at it here, it's really hard to
Yeah,
tell.
we're talking, molecules. We're getting down into this. It's not quite, but small, it's small. Yeah, so in the knife world, this is more of a personal question about knives. I feel like everyone has a different knife that's their workhorse. You know, like when you're in the kitchen and you're just cooking for you and your family, what's your grab? Let's say you got to cut up. You just, I guess it's a tough question because like any tool, there's different tools for different jobs. But what's your workhorse?
Either an 8-inch chef's knife or a 10-inch chef's knife.
Okay.
And I like the wide ones. I like this deep dude. And so if I'm just cooking for Leanne and I, or cutting something up, helping her out, I'll use that 8-inch chef's.
Okay.
And if it's if we're cooking for 6, I'll grab a 10.
Okay, just cutting more stuff, more surface area.
Bigger pile of food.
Yeah. And as I got evolved more into food and knives and when you cut different, I might use this for my workhorse for cutting up all these vegetables and prepping things. But when it comes time, and you can slice steak and fish with this, great. Perfect. Absolutely. Yeah. But you can dive down into, you can geek out and dive down into different, knives for every tool. But at the same time, I got to go to, a friend's mom's house. She does everything with one knife, and it's amazing. It's just a cutting board. Yeah. And
it's all here.
Yeah. And just like that old world style of cooking. So like my point being is like, just because you have every chef knife and every type of knife doesn't always mean everything.
What's your go-to?
My go-to, sometimes to be honest, I like the fat ones as well, but I grab sometimes the 6-inch. Sometimes that's all I need. Yeah. But I do like a knife, and both of these, you can do it with these. Neither of these are but where you could chop stuff up and pick things up with it.
This is my second favorite. This 5-inch utility.
It's the best.
I use this for everything.
Yeah.
Like cutting a pineapple, chopping up an apple, tomatoes, a little bit of garlic.
As it sets in, it probably is the knife I grab most. And just because and as you get more comfortable with it, you can pull off a lot of stuff that you do with it. I mean, it's not the best at crushing 12 cloves of garlic. Right, but it's surgical. You can get in there, you can perform, cut a sandwich. The best, the best, right? And that leads me into, when you say break down a chicken, if you know where you're going, no problem. But I see a lot of people use the right, for breaking down chickens. You can cause some damage too. You gotta be careful
on the
when you
knife.
Cut.
Yeah. So here's what I see is that, or especially at Thanksgiving, this is always happening. They cook a turkey once a year. They don't really know where the joint is. So the joint is between the knuckle, right? Between the drumstick, right? And so this thing is kind of big on the outside. So what people do is they cut in, they hit that cartilage that's around the edge of the bone, and they're not going through it, so they do this.
Turning.
They twist the knife, and that'll chip the edge of your knife. So if you're trying to cut through a chicken or a turkey and you hit the bone, just move down a little bit to find actual
that
joint
and not just force it through bone.
Exactly.
But I think the biggest takeaway you said there too as well is that because this knife is designed for down force, right? It's thinner here than it is on the spine. So it can take more of the beating this way. It's not meant to do this. No. Right? Like that thin brittle edge,
you'll break it.
It's gonna chip. And I know that too well. I mean, I go away for a week and Peggy, if you're watching, love you. But and all of a sudden there's 1/8-inch chips in my blade. And I think it's from twisting and turning.
Yeah, for sure. And if you've got a soft cutting board,
it grabs.
And let's say it's dished out just a little bit from wear and tear, and you go in and you didn't go through, and then you do this, you can chip your knife.
Especially on, with some knives where they get pretty high on the Rockwell, and the Rockwell being how the hardness of metal is measured.
How hard the steel is, for sure.
Yeah. So when it comes to buying a knife, what would be? I mean, I always tell people, and I still think, I'm sure you would agree. It's such a personal preference. The best way. I mean, online is great. If you know what you're looking for, you know your style, and you're familiar with brands, you can't beat it, right? But if you're not and you're shopping around, I go back to comparing it to getting a pair of pants or something, or shoes for that matter. You really need to hold it and touch it and use it, and it just need to put it in your hand. Because as soon as it's on and you feel it, you're gonna know right away. Yep. I mean, it's gonna be sharp. Right. So it's it comes down to how you hold it and feel it. That's how that's how, not to answer my own question. But.
Yeah, and make sure you're comfortable. I mean, I think from all the cooking programs that are on TV, they see these guys using a big 10-inch chef's knife, and
Right.
that's a lot of blade, you know.
It's
if
a
you're
lot,
not
it's a
used to
lot.
it. Or, you know, these guys have gone to cooking school, they've worked in restaurants for a long time. So you think, oh, I need a 10-inch chef's knife, and it's just kind of too much. So if you pick it up and you go, oh, shoot, that's a lot of knife. You know, they make 10, 8, 6, and you just find what feels comfortable.
Sure. And then I mean, I always like, and you guys do a phenomenal job with this, but you know, a lot of knives they don't, is where I always tell, look for a knife that has up on the spine here and on the inside heel where it's a little, it's been touched, it's finished, it's rounded. Because you start putting in a lot, you start cutting, you know, even just at home, but if you're anyone who's been working in a restaurant or is putting in a bunch of hours, you know, using a knife, you'll get nasty blisters, some little rough edges here and up here. And I'm talking like full on screwy up blisters. So yeah, I always tell people, look for that, something that you're going to use that can handle a bit of friction.
Yeah.
Because when that is raw, it's rough.
Yeah, man. They all used to be sharp on the back.
Yeah.
It was just like a 90-degree
Old
angle.
French, like sabatiers or however it's pronounced.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like the the profile of this knife. It's like it's almost like I mean, it kind of has a traditional like European profile, right?
Right.
As opposed to like a Japanese style or
Traditional chef's knife for sure. Same amount of rock. I mean, it's got good rock so that you can chop easily, but
not a huge belly, you know. And like the more I cut these days, like I do more of a pole cut, you know. And like I always tell people, you know, if you're just chopping something, let's say a perfect example is like chives, right? Like don't cut your chives like that because you're using that much of the blade. And you're kind of, even though it's sharp as hell and it's cutting it, but like you're also bruising it. Why not use the whole blade and slice it? And you'll see, you know, like when you have to set up a station, if you're working at a restaurant and you have, you know, a quart container of chives, you do them that way as opposed to sliding. You see the difference.
Yeah, they're kind of
they'll last longer.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, just finding your way. But I see people all the time just crush chopping everything. And again, there's more than, you know, there's a ton of ways to do it right and wrong, and whatever works well. But I always encourage people to use the whole blade. You got an 8-inch blade, use it.
And I like this this sort of orbital cut.
Okay.
Right. So imagine an ellipse here, and so you can. This is going to be a push cut as you're doing a sliding cut. You could do the sliding cut this way as well. Or you can cut this way. So essentially my hand is going through an ellipse or an orbit. And so then you're getting the slide cut that you were just talking about.
The slice. And again, you're doing basically the same thing, just different personal techniques, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, cutting's great. And it's one of the things, you know, it's just like, you got to just do it. You know, I see people cutting like this all the time, and it bothers you. And they're comfortable, and I'm sure you're going to get bit.
Well, they've never cut the end of their finger off before, but you do it one time, and then now you're going to tuck those fingers and keep the
thumb. The thumb is because it drags out.
Yeah, these are like this is your shield, right? These are your little soldiers out front, and you just hide the thumb. Then you don't have to look.
You don't even have to look. No, it's true. I think that's a great tip, Bob. Is hide the thumb, because you do get lazy. You don't, before you know it. These are straight, but all of a sudden you're turning and that tip is there. I've done it. Yeah.
And hopefully you found it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, it just went right into the deep fryer. No. All jokes aside, yeah. It's just luckily it was a little nip, but you start cutting in. You start cutting into the nail.
There's a lot of nerves at the end of your finger.
Yeah. Oh man. Like you said, hopefully you learn once, or if you're really lucky, never. But yeah. Hide the thumb, hide the fingers, and you'll find your rhythm, you know. Yeah, and for me, like the knife has always been when it comes to cooking, it's just an extension of your hand. It's a tool, right? You know, it's however you want to, whatever you want to manipulate in the food world, you know, you're going to do with this. This is your surgical instrument for preparing foods. You know, it's I've always been fascinated with the hands-on, like tactileness of knives, you know. And I've told you before, I've dabbled with like fooling around with making them a bit and just kind of grinding steel. It's a very primitive human, like a very deep embedded kind of satisfying. And, you know, if humans been trying to sharpen stuff and cut things with them for forever, you know, for as long as we've been around, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Whether it was, you know, powdered steel or, you know, a piece of flint or glass, whatever, in natural glasses. Always been fascinated with it. And to have guys like you or people like you where you can really dig into also be using the technology that's present now to just make these, like, you know, like race cars of knives that are, you know, approachable to everyone. I mean, this is hell. I mean, if you think about what goes into making this, I mean, hell, I mean, you certainly know, but
So here's what blows my mind. I mean, I know how these things are made. We make knives in the shop every day, but what these guys can do is numbers.
right.
Like, they can make something of such high tech quality.
And you say they, just dive into
ZWILLING.
they.
I mean,
really-
it's ZWILLING, you know, they've been around for 270 years and they own a factory in Japan. These are all made in Japan. And look, I think this is an absolutely gorgeous knife. I am bragging. I think it's really beautiful.
Yeah, you should be. I mean, look at that. It's gorgeous.
To turn them out by the thousands is a whole nother challenge, and
It's mind-boggling,
They know how
really.
to do it, yeah. So it's
Yeah.
cool. I'm
Yeah,
stoked.
I mean, to think that this can be done on a production level, it is. It's mind-boggling.
I mean, look at the control.
Yeah.
So this little layer of steel, this cutting edge,
And everyone's different.
SG2, but it's centered.
Right.
And to keep that centered is a huge challenge. I mean, it is not unusual to see a lesser brand company where this whole pattern is shifted up on one side and down on the other side. And that just means that the core is off center.
And I would have never thought of that, you know, being not a knife maker or have the eye to even.
I mean,
Yeah, I see what you're
look at
saying.
the
though.
control.
That's crazy.
This is crazy because that thing is dead centered. And
Let me
it's,
hold that up. I don't think it's
it is,
that line that runs down the middle there.
it's about the thickness of a razor blade. And,
Yeah.
and you have to keep that thing.
The thickness of a
absolutely
razor,
centered.
blade,
Yeah, the core steel, the cutting steel, the really good stuff that takes an
yeah.
edge.
The core steel. So being that darker gray line, or even
Wrap that thing up so you get-
There we go.
There we go. But yeah, to keep that thing centered and to control that pattern so you get that nice regular wave, it
Sure.
is a technological challenge.
and that's different steel, like you were saying, than the wavy nickel.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's almost like a protective.
the nickel and the stainless are it's like a sandwich. So you
Okay.
got 50 layers of nickel and stainless, all this pattern stuff. Then one layer of the really good cutting steel, and that's the dark stuff right on the edge that you see that wave going along. And then you've got another 50 alternating layers of nickel and stainless. And, you know, this pattern is impressed. We have to push that, we have to disrupt those layers to create that chevron pattern. And in doing so, you don't want to shove the center off center, or otherwise the pattern starts to look kind of wacky. And those are done one at a time by a guy standing in front of a machine, carefully placing the knife and pressing it. So yeah, these things get handled. There's like 150 craftsmen with this knife. This knife would have passed through all of their hands until it finally leaves the factory and gets put in the box.
Is it the same steel as this other model?
Same steel.
Cool. Same stainless setup,
Same
different
steel.
profile.
Different profile.
Now, so you got this knife, you invested in, you know, you threw away your got rid or donated your lesser knife, your junkier knife or something, and you bought yourself a tool that's gonna help you, you know, like, so how would you recommend storing that and keeping it sharp and just proper basic kind of, you know, and say you are more entry level to the knife world.
If you've got room in your kitchen, let's say you've got some wall area that you could use, I like a magnetic bar. So it's sometimes a metal bar, sometimes a wood bar. We have wood ones at home, and they have magnets along the way, and you can stick this, just like those knives behind me on the, right over, let's see, where's it going?
It's backwards.
It's there. There's magnets in that block that hold those knives up against it. And what I like about a magnetic bar is that all your knives are, you can see them.
Right.
As opposed to the block, when all you see is the handle sticking up
Sure.
on the block. it's hard to know, and I never put stuff back in the same place, and so I gotta pull a knife, pull a knife, pull a knife, tell you, oh, that's the utility knife, that's the one I'm looking for. Whereas when they're on the bar, you can see exactly what your inventory is. So I like the bar first. If you don't have room, I like that easel block. That's tricky over there.
Sure.
Because again, you can see the inventory of the block and you just grab the one that you want. I also like the fact that they're out in the air. Sometimes a block that you gotta slide the knife
breathing.
into.
Wicking away moisture and.
Yeah, sometimes when you wash them, there's still some moisture on there, even though you may have wiped them, but they're not entirely dry.
Sure.
So they've got to be dry. Lastly, you can have a knife drawer where it's got a block in it, but most of all, you want to keep them clean and dry. Wash them by hand. Don't put them in the dishwasher.
Just a little soap and a sponge, fine, like a normal, like.
Yeah, totally. Hot water, soap. Wash the blade, wash the handle off, then dry them. Like make sure they're dry. Don't just wipe them off.
Are these knives available now?
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
available. It's an exclusive. Sur La Table.
Amazing.
The only people that have them. And
So like, I remember, Bob, when we were hanging out a while ago, you kind of blew me away with showing the sharpness of a knife. You know, a thing like a tomato, it was obvious, you know, like everyone's kind of struggled with a dull knife where instead of just cutting, you're cutting, because it's so, I think it's a great indicator of a,
like,
you're
you know,
pushing.
it's just this, the back of the knife is just, of course, sliding because it's totally dull. But if you set the edge of even the edge of the knife on the tomato, you could feel it just grab it. Look, it made a little mark. Let's see if I can show you here. See, it just made a little nip mark right there,
Yeah.
just by setting the edge on there. But if you're uncertain, I mean, everybody usually has a piece of paper. And this cut, this push cut through the paper, that's actually not a huge challenge for a knife. But if the blade's really keen, it'll cut the paper as it's in a tube shape
Oh, wow.
and
Yeah.
cut a little donut out of that.
You're not doing that with beat up blade. That is for sure.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And then with the tomato too, I mean, that's where I always like to pull as well, but I mean, that even feels good. I mean, you can get that thing like translucent. You can see through it. You know? Look at
Good one.
that.
Oh,
Yeah.
man, that's awesome.
It's translucent, you know. So I mean, sharp knife is in my opinion, it's a safer knife, and like you can always do a good tell with a carrot too, right? Because it's hard and it snaps and it wants to like do like shattering, splintery things.
So listen,
Oh, shh, quiet on set.
that's what I'm talking
No
about.
snap. That's incredible.
No cracking.
No,
sound.
yeah, not like you're splitting a log.
Exactly. You don't want to hear it. It's not a maul.
Wow.
You're actually slicing.
That's right. That's right. Because it is like wood, right? When you have a dull knife and your edge is a little bit of a wedge, you get that pop.
You hear it go.
Yeah, not today, Bob. That's incredible, man. And then, I mean, as a knife, as you're using it, as you're cutting it up, I mean, these are brand new knives. It's gonna start to get a little dull. So that comes down to how you handle it, right? I mean, you could cut these for, if that's all you did, and then you put it back in a properly storage area, it should stay sharp.
For years.
Yeah.
Literally for years. So the thing that I believe makes your knives the dullest is the cutting surface. So you want to be
Cutting on glass is what you mean?
not cutting on glass, not cutting on granite,
Right.
not cutting on stainless steel. You know, have a board. It could be bamboo. I like wood myself, like maple is good. But, you know, think about just cutting through the veg
Right.
and not crashing into this, not
Right.
crashing into the board. So you don't really bang on the board like that because you're actually, you know, hammering on the edge of that knife. But if you're just carefully cutting through the veg and barely encountering the board,
Right.
then that knife will stay sharp for a long time. The other thing is, don't throw them in the sink. The sink is made out of porcelain or stainless steel. And you can actually the edge of the knife is maybe the thickness of a human hair. And so it's kind of vulnerable, even though it's hard steel and it's, you know, highly engineered. You throw the knife into the sink or actually knock it into the sink, you'll make little dings along the edge of
Sure.
that knife.
Turn serrated real quick.
So not into the sink, and then again, not in a drawer with a bunch of tools. And every time you open and close that drawer, those tools are banging around, and you know, the edge of the knife may hit your tenderizing hammer.
Back to that Rockwell scale of this being harder, the wood being softer.
Right.
I mean, softer things shouldn't damage a harder thing, right? I mean,
Exactly.
that's the science behind that.
Right, but there's an accumulation over time. If you look at erosion, water dripping on a rock,
Sure.
water is very soft, but over time it'll erode away. Everything gets dull.
Sure.
And so you need to get your knife sharpened like once a year, once every 2 years.
Cut the right things. Don't go cutting your frozen fish with it, or frozen things. Not so much. You know, it's the
Frozen
no.
things. No,
Zero frozen.
No frozen things. No bones.
Right.
No coconuts. Don't cut coconuts. Why do you need a coconut? I mean, get a hammer to open the coconut.
Sure. Or the spine. Fun little trick. You hold it in your hand, crack it in a circle. Perfect. And it works. But yeah, to your point, hard, crazy things like butternut squash. You see people cranking through them all the time.
Yeah. And they're trying to cut that stem.
Right.
So that squash in and of itself, it's hard.
Yeah.
But that stem is like, it's like
It's
iron.
tough. Yeah.
So you don't cut the stem, cut back, you're cutting the head of the squash and then hold it carefully. I mean, one of the things that makes me nervous is when people are trying to cut something hard.
Clean that up.
You deserve it. Something hard and roly-poly, like
a jicama.
Jicama, that's what I was gonna say. And this jicama is kind of nice because it's got
Flat
this
spot.
big flat spot. But if it didn't have that flat spot,
Like a sweet potato or
that's the first thing that I suggest. The first cut, you want to be super controlled. Now you got a flat spot.
make a work surface.
Now it's make a work surface.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's a professional kind of a thing.
That's right.
Yeah. Right on.
Now you can work with it in
Yeah.
a safe thing, right? Because you're right, as that thing's rocking around,
It's
you got
dangerous.
this razor blade in your hand, and a slit means
Right.
can mean a cut, you know? So yeah, I think that's great. And make whatever you're cutting stable and in a situations where you can cut it.
Now it's easy, right?
Yeah.
Rock
And you could love, you can't beat a sharp knife.
It's like a power tool. It feels
It's satisfying. You're getting stuff done. And the more I get dull knife, I mean, that's just like an old saying, like a dull knife, when you get a dull knife, you're pushing. You know,
too much pressure.
put too much pressure, too much energy into trying to cut instead of letting the tool do the cutting.
And then if you don't have a flat surface and you've got a dull knife,
And now you have rock.
now you're going to the hospital.
Right. And I can imagine as it's rocking, you can introduce that movement that we didn't want, you know, so you're cutting, all of a sudden the thing moves, your knife's still in the hard, and you could chip,
Yeah.
you know?
Back to the edge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to ask Bob, and I'm sure some folks are curious as well. I mean, it's such a cool, I mean, it's an art. I mean, it's a trade that you follow the dream. I'm assuming, tell me a little bit, how did you get into knife making? You know, they're not really encouraging it in high school these days.
Yeah, I was going to college and I was working full time at the Four Seasons in the kitchen. And I found out that I
Like prep cooking?
Yeah, I was working the line.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I was working the line at the Four Seasons. And you know, I found out I wanted to be an oceanographer. And then I talked to some friends and they're like, you know, you need a PhD. And I didn't think I was going to be
Been down that road, Bob.
couldn't hang that long.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, with all this energy I'm putting into school, I think I want to start a business. And I realized that nobody could sharpen their knives in the kitchen. I just
Right.
saw that there was no competency in sharpening knives. And I thought, well, maybe I'll start. And I started to sharpen knives. And I sharpened knives for like 5 years all around Seattle.
Like on whetstones and
No, I had a big water wheel in
Oh,
the
cool.
truck, like this old school stuff. I had water dripping on a 3-foot diameter wheel
wow.
and a big metal guard around it. And then I had a bunch of different, they're called setup wheels.
Okay.
It's like a canvas with glue and abrasive.
Oh wow.
And so then I blend all the edges and polish them.
Oh cool.
Yeah.
You get them wicked sharp.
Shaveable.
Yeah.
Everything was shaveable.
Because you hear nightmare stories about I brought my knife to this guy in a van.
Yeah.
And he took, you know,
Yeah.
½ inch of material off.
Yeah.
So
So you got it. If it's a new sharpener, if you're trying out somebody new and you think, oh, let's see, I wonder if this is a good service.
bring him a cheapo.
The cheapo knife, one, and then see how they do. And if you like the service, then
Bring in your Ferrari to the shop. Yeah.
exactly. Taking the good stuff.
So yeah, so back to so you got into doing it at the Four Seasons, and then sharpening knives. You found a little, so like a neat little niche there that people weren't kind of getting into or doing on their own.
So I sharpened for 5 years all around Seattle, and then I had an opportunity to take a class, 2-week-long class in Arkansas,
Okay.
and coal-fired forge.
Oh,
and
cool.
12 guys, and it was 100 degrees, and we were just banging on leaf springs. And I just thought it was cool. I liked fire.
Sure.
I liked hammering on stuff. And then we made tools that we had to pass this test. We take a 10-inch chef's knife, or it wasn't a chef's knife, but it was a 10-inch knife, and they hung a 1-inch thick sisal rope from the ceiling.
Oh wow.
And you had to
hang
just-
a car with it. Yeah, like it's tough.
It's strong, it's tough,
It's
it's
tough.
super fibrous.
Yeah.
And we had to cut that with one swipe.
There's one side.
Yep, no more than 6 inches from the end. So there wasn't a bunch of weight on
No,
it.
there was no weight.
No
weight.
It's
Wow.
just wagging
Just
around.
dangling.
Yeah. So that was the first part. Then you had to chop a 2x4. like
With the same sharpening.
same sharp
1
edge.
inch.
1 inch. You had to chop a 2x4 twice.
Come on.
All the way through. So then you got to shave with the knife
After?
after
Stop
the
it.
2x4.
No way.
So then you put it in a
And
vise.
people, you passed this?
In 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, we learned how to
Man.
do this. So when I thought about all the knives that I had sharpened, all the stainless steel stuff, all the Dexter knives, I just thought, well, man, we made a knife that was better than those blades.
Yeah, I'd say.
2-8 course, spring steel. I'm like, I'm in. I get to play with fire.
I'm in.
And you know, it takes maybe 3 or 4 days to make a knife, simple knife. But then I have it forever. And you work in a restaurant, you take 3 or 4 days to really put a banquet together, and you serve it, it's gone.
Right, see ya.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it is, it's such, I mean, there's a bunch of tools in the modern kitchen these days, but this, I mean, it's a workhorse, man. You're gonna use it for your entire life. And it's one of what I love about a good knife is that, like, or anything good for that matter, a good tool, is that you get a good one and you treat it well, you should be able to pass it down. I mean, it should outlive you.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, you know what I mean? It's steel. You know,
Yeah.
it should, if you treat it well.
And if you get a couple of knives, you could get rid of most of the gadgets if
Yeah.
you needed to.
Yeah, right,
You know,
right,
if you
right.
just had those 2 knives and you knew how to use them, you can do everything with them.
What is your recommended if someone's looking for like the ideal, you know, I'm just getting in, I just got a house or a new apartment, whatever the story is, and they want to get a nice
Yeah.
set of knives, they want to start cooking more at home, which I support. What would be your recommendation of knives to get?
I'd get the 8 first, or the
Right.
6.
Right.
You felt
Your
more comfortable,
preference,
or the 10. And then I'd get the utility blade
I'd almost take the utility over a pair.
first.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
because you can do the same stuff
Yeah,
for the most part. you
I
know?
almost never use a paring knife.
Right,
It's too small.
sure,
But my grandmother, that's all she used.
right.
was a paring knife.
So 6 or 8, pair or petty,
Yeah.
and then like a bread knife.
Yeah.
You know, you need a serrated.
Yeah.
And a good sharpening steel. That's you're kind of in a good, you start finding it, you start geeking out in the knife world and you want to get, you know, some 12-inch sushi slicer, knock yourself out.
Yeah.
But you can get you can pull it off with this.
You could do everything with these.
Yeah,
these-
usually
Those
do.
3 blades.
Yeah,
for
that's
sure.
amazing.
Bob, someone is asking if you're planning on adding a serrated knife to your collection.
I think eventually we will do a serrated to the Cumulus line. The Cumulus line just came out last week. And so I think we wanted to introduce it, see how well it was received, and then at some point in the future, we'll probably add a serrated.
Yeah, because it's a mandatory workhorse in the arsenal. And then, you know, I love in all your other knives, you know, you have darker handles, and I love them
Yeah.
all. This is the first one to my knowledge that has this beautiful white handle. And I'm a huge fan of that. I think it's just you know, like you said, it almost looks like bone or ivory or something like that. But it's just a beautiful detail of a knife. And I think it's just a very classy, standout kind of look. Was there an inspiration behind picking the white handle or?
You know, I think we wanted something that was a little bit lighter. I think we have this long tradition of dark handled, kind of a little bit more masculine leaning. And I think that these are just lighter and more attractive. And I think the biggest challenge was finding the right handle material, was finding something that was going to be durable, that wouldn't pick up oils and
Sure,
dirt from your
especially
hand.
white. I mean, yeah.
Exactly, because like a lot of these plastics will, even a Dexter has got a POM handle. It's a kind of an injection molded plastic.
Oh, POM.
They get dirty over
Yeah.
time. They just get funky and dirty, and then they look kind of gross. This stuff won't do that.
This will not pick up stain.
No.
Wow.
I mean, think about the cue balls, right? Think
Right.
about the cue balls in the bar
Sure.
and
Getting whacked.
chalk and hitting it hard and they're white.
Good point.
Yeah.
So this, yeah, so, I mean, the first thing I'm thinking of, and I hate to put you on the spot here, like if I'm cooking, if I got like powdered turmeric, no, not staining it.
I don't think so.
That stuff stains everything. I didn't know.
Uh-oh.
I'll find out. I'll let you know. I'll try it home.
All right, all
I'll
right.
email you
Yeah,
personally.
let me know. All right.
That would be incredible. But yeah, that's not picking up a stain. I can see that being a huge challenge. And then same with the name. Was there like Cumulus? I don't think I've ever heard that in a.
So, we wanted to name the line, and we, at first I wanted to call it, what do you want to call it? God, I can't remember now, but it was some cloud name and it was already taken, and so then we started to go down all of these names to find something that hadn't already been used. And when we finally landed on Cumulus, I kind of liked it because this is really an accumulation of knowledge from stuff that we've learned in the first lines and the second iterations. And then, we've gotten to this point, and I feel like it's an accumulation of things that we've learned in the marketplace and what we've learned through knife making, and now we've landed here. So it feels like a good fit to me.
Yeah, heck yeah. Now, Bob, I told you I wasn't going to bring you down this rabbit hole of information. But when it comes to, I feel like a lot of people always ask me, and just like in a quick explanation, if someone was going to get a whetstone or even just have real quick, can you just show or tell us like the angles or the bevels that people should be trying to follow or ride on this particular knife?
Yeah. So for the hone, put that puppy on the board in front of you, lay the knife flat against it, and then just clock it out about 10 degrees. It's really not much. I'm trying to see if you can see that. Think about putting a matchbook, an old-fashioned paper open up matchbook on the steel, then lay the knife on the matchbook. So it's just like 10 to 15 degrees. Another way to look at it is here. This is 90 degrees.
Right.
Half of that's 45, half of that's 22 and a half, half of that's about 10.
Sure.
And that's where you want to be, is about 10. Keep it narrow. Keep your finger at the heel, and then you can push it all the way in. I put it on the board so this thing's stable.
Right.
So I don't have to worry about holding two things stable out here. This thing's stable. Put the knife, shallow angle, my finger's at the back. As soon as my finger hits the steel, I'm there.
Right.
Now I put about 6 to 10 pounds of pressure, 6 to 8 pounds of pressure. And you can check yourself on a baking scale. And if you check the baking scale, don't push with your other hand. Just push down, because I'm not using my other hand here.
That's right.
I just got the knife. So 6 to 8 pounds of pressure, and then you draw the knife down and towards you, and then do the other side. And you don't have to go fast. There's nothing in the speed that's going to help you.
Like doing push-ups, better off doing 10 good ones than 50 bad ones.
Control, control, control. So then it ends up looking like this once you get some practice. And
Sounds good. And then those 10 degrees, and that same mechanics and principle you would apply to using no whetstone as well.
exactly.
Right.
And it's shallow. Keep it shallow, because we're just cutting
Consistency's king.
carrots, tomatoes.
And I tell people all the time, like when I like sharpening knives, and Bob, you got a great kit that they can get, but I love. It comes with a whole bunch of stones that will get you to from really hurting knives to just kind of tune ups. It's got a great bridge, and it's a great kit that you can get. But what I've always found with the whetstones and just sharpening in general is, like you were saying, go slow and don't just get into some crazy. Take a second, look at what you do.
Right.
If you're laying it down too flat, you'll start to see
Scratches.
Yeah, you're starting to see little wears from the abrasion marks.
Yeah,
from what
sometimes
you're
you
doing.
see scratches all the way up the side.
Yeah, if you get down flat, you're touching. Now you're only up to here.
And one trick that I think you've done before is you could take one of those wide black markers and make a line along the edge of the knife. And then when you push your knife against the sharpening stone, you can check and see where the black mark has disappeared. And if too much of it has disappeared, you're too flat.
Right.
And if too little of it's disappeared, then you're too steep. So you want just that Goldilocks zone of 10 to 15 degrees.
Sure. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so we are getting ready to some Q&A, although you have already been answering some of the questions already. So someone wants to know, I mean, you already mentioned about the sharpening stone and the steel. Are both necessary steps to getting the knife sharpened?
So this tool this is a maintenance tool between stoning. So I'm going to call this honing. They all fall under sharpening. If sharpening is the umbrella, honing and stoning fall under that umbrella. This is a maintenance tool in between when you go to stone. So if imagine that this piece of paper and this is your knife edge and it's nice and straight. When you're cutting or chopping and you're banging that on the cutting board, what happens over time is that your edge, your knife edge, gets a little wrinkle. I don't know if you can kind of see that, but it's just wiggly and kind of out of alignment. And this sharpening steel on the two smooth sides, if you were to rub this back and forth on there, you could actually straighten that edge out. It will realign the edge itself. And over time, as the edge bangs into the cutting board, it bends and it straightens out and bends and straightens out. Part of it will break away and the knife will start to become dull. That's when you rotate the steel to the two grooved sides, which are more aggressive. They're actually going to remove material. And you can use the two grooved sides and then rotate and finish on the two smooth sides. And the smooth sides will actually burnish and reinforce and strengthen that edge. When this tool is no longer making your knife able to just zip through a tomato, that's when you break the stones out and you take 10 minutes, reestablish the edge, and then rinse and repeat the whole thing over time.
So if this, so this is the oil change and then the whetstone is the engine rebuild, if that makes more sense. Probably not.
Sure.
Yeah, and then like I've never used one, but I've certainly seen a bunch of them, like the little machine, you plug them in, it looks like a pencil sharpener, and you run your thing through it. I mean, how do you feel about it?
I don't like them. I don't like them because they could take off a lot of material. And if they have 3 slots, just use the 2 last slots, unless your knife is really messed up.
That first one's like 60 grit or what's
Really aggressive, right?
Yeah.
And if the slot is such that you can't get the very heel of the knife all the way in, then it starts to change the profile and it will actually dish out the most valuable cutting area, which is right here. So I just say if you got one, just be careful and be cautious.
And I'm sure there's levels of quality to them.
Yeah.
But like anything.
Yeah.
But they kind of scare me. You're putting a lot of trust into I don't know. I like the movement and like the meditative kind of state that you get it. I like it. But if it's not, the whetstone and you get to know your knife better, and I feel like you will have a better understanding of it.
To me, it's kind of like if you were going to cook a steak and the recipe just says steak, throw it in the pan for 5 minutes on each side and eat. So you're not really paying attention to it.
Right.
You're just following this thing. And I think that machine sort of does
Every
that.
steak's a little different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What
So
are
throw it
you,
away.
sorry, what are your favorite materials to use for knives?
Steel or handle material?
They didn't specify.
Materials.
Just-
So I like tool steel for the blades of the knife. I happen to use steel called 52100. It's a ball bearing steel, and the wheels of your car, the wheel bearings in your car are probably made out of 52100. It'll rust, but it takes a wicked edge. That's 52100. Yeah. So it just has.
But it'll stain too.
It'll
wicked
stain.
wicked steel that you can. I love it. I think it puts a great edge. Oh, look, I cut that tomato before, and this is any carbon steel.
Yep.
And I neglected it, and you will get a little mark from it.
Yeah.
So you do have to keep that in mind if you start messing with carbon steel. It's great material, not as carefree of a maintenance.
Yeah. I love the SG2 in this. I think it's absolutely beautiful powdered metallurgy. The other knife, this Meiji line, this has a core material that the cutting edge of the stuff is called AEBL. We made knives in the shop out of that stuff, and it was designed for razor blades back in the 60s. It is beautiful stuff. I mean, it's really fine grained. It's easy to sharpen.
Is it
and
harder?
stainless. Nope, it's about the same. It's very close to 52-100.
Okay.
It's more difficult to sharpen because it's stainless than the 52-100. It gets almost as sharp, but it's more difficult to sharpen.
As far as structural integrities, or I mean, is there much of it? Is one stronger than? Is there a benefit? I guess is what I'm getting at to having a laminate steel as opposed to a mono.
No, not really. We do this for decorative purposes, really, just to make them more attractive. But these days, mono steels are every bit as strong as a laminate.
What are the advantages of high carbon steel versus stainless steel?
So high carbon is easier to sharpen and takes a keener edge, but it requires more care and feed. You got to be really careful with it. You got to keep it clean and dry. You really got to dry it, not just wipe it off. And as you can see with, what we
With
cut
Brad
that-
stain there.
Well, we just were talking and there was a tomato sitting on there for a little while, but
It's a happy accident,
Yeah,
Bob. So this is going to happen to anyone with a carbon knife at some point. How do you have a little trick of the trade to kind of remove that, or is it?
I mean, you could use an abrasive, or you could use a really soft, like a 3M scrub pad, and you could probably take that off.
Right.
That's a very light. But the patina that will bloom on that blade over time.
It's gorgeous.
It is, and it will actually protect it. So
Right.
that's an oxidation layer. And as that oxidation layer grows on the knife and as
That's
it turns
gorgeous.
gray, yeah, it's beautiful, but it will protect it a little bit from rusting.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've gone as far as if it wasn't me, but I left the knife somewhere one time. It wasn't me, but I came back and there was, someone meant well, they used my knife and then they washed it off. It wasn't fully dry. I came back and there was some pretty severe, like little rust pits in it. And I kind of I eventually got rid of them, but it was just like I used a very, very high grit, wet sandpaper.
Yeah.
Like in the thousands.
Yeah.
And just kind of, it'll change. You almost have to do the whole knife.
Yeah.
Because it'll leave like a little buff spot kind of thing. But that's how I've gotten some like deep damaging pits out, or some like, much higher quality stains than that quick thing that happened.
And-
That's just an oxidation.
And when you're sanding the blade, I don't know if you can see this or not. Where am I gonna go?
You want to switch? You want me to switch to the other view?
Yeah, it's good to be. So if, let's say, we've got this stain here, and let's say you wanted to scrub that, and you've got a little 3M scrub pad. Instead of trying to scrub that thing out in the air this way, or worse, even this way, where you could slip, or let's say you've got some food that's sort of stuck on here. Let's say maybe it's a garlic or something, you know how sticky
Sure.
that stuff can be. You want to set the knife on a cutting board, and then
That's a
you can
great tip.
come in with your scrub pad and not worry about getting
Cut
sliced.
yourself to the bone, right?
Right, and then flip it over and then scrub the other side, and then you can go ahead and rinse that guy off under the sink.
That's
And
a great tip, Bob. And would you also, I mean, if you look closely, especially on a knife like this, you can see almost like, is there grain to that steel? Like, would you wanna?
there is grain, but you can't see it. What you're seeing are the machine marks from the finishing
Okay.
machines in the shop,
Right, okay.
in the factory.
Open up to more questions. Shout them right out when you know
Okay, I think you have two more. Time for two more.
them. Okay.
One will be, when is time to take them to a professional sharpener?
When it's beyond your skill level,
Good.
or when it's more convenient. And again, you want to be careful. Not every sharpener has the same skill level. Again, take the worst knife you have. If you're unfamiliar with the person's work, give it a try and see if you like it. But yeah, I mean, if the knives are not performing the way that you want them to, and you don't want to use a hone, you don't want to break out some stones, then it's time to go get them sharpened. This has one job. This is one task, and that is to cut things well. And when it's no longer doing that, then you want to either fix them up yourself and get them sharpened, or take them to somebody who can tune them up for you.
Yeah, or even I know there's around the country and world for that matter, there's a bunch of really good knife shops that really know their knives and sell a bunch of knives. And they also offer like some high-end knife sharpening services as well that I've been exposed to and seen some really really awesome operations that can do a good job. So kind of Google locally and, or just like we were saying before, get a knife, get a whetstone and put in a little time and figure it out.
There's a ton of people who have gotten into sharpening and selling knives and making knives. So I think today, I mean, as opposed to when I started my sharpening service, there's just so many more talented
Yeah, that's a great point.
people around.
Yeah.
All right, so I think it's time.
Okay, cool. Thank
Yeah,
you.
so thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Bob and
You're welcome.
Brad.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Bob
nice
and
to meet
Brad.
you.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Let's go cook.